The scorching summer sun beat down on Zelda Foster as she trudged along the dusty road leading into Challis, Idaho. Her 3-year-old daughter Emma's small hand clutched tightly in hers, and their meager belongings stuffed into a weathered carpet bag that felt heavier with each step. The year was 1879, and the promise of a new beginning seemed to fade with each passing mile. "Mama, I'm thirsty," Emma whimpered, her chubby cheeks flushed from the heat. Zelda stopped, set down the bag, and pulled out their canteen. The water inside was warm and there wasn't much left, but she held it to her daughter's lips anyway. "Small sips, sweetheart. We're almost there." In truth, Zelda had no idea what awaited them in Challis. All she knew was that she couldn't stay in her hometown of boys any longer, not after Richard had died and his parents had made it painfully clear that they wanted nothing to do with their son's widow and child. Especially when they discovered that Emma wasn't actually Richard's biological daughter. The scandal had been too much for the prominent family. Zelda had been just 19 when she'd had Emma out of wedlock, the result of a brief romance with a traveling salesman who had promised her the world and then disappeared. Richard had married her anyway, saying he loved her enough to raise another man's child as his own. But tuberculosis had claimed him just a year into their marriage, leaving Zelda alone again with a child to raise and a community that had never truly accepted her. As they approached the outskirts of Challis, Zelda could see that it was a typical frontier town. Dusty Main Street, wooden buildings with false fronts, a few horses tied to hitching posts. She had come here because her late mother's friend, Martha Jenkins, had written years ago about settling in Challis. It was a slim hope that Martha was still here or would even remember her, but it was all Zelda had. "Look, Emma, there's the town," she said, forcing cheerfulness into her voice. "We'll find a place to rest soon." The main street was busy with afternoon activity, ranchers loading supplies, women bustling between shops, children running and playing. Zelda felt the stares as she walked down the street, a stranger with a small child and nowhere to go. She approached a gray-haired woman arranging vegetables outside a general store. "Excuse me, madam, I'm looking for Martha Jenkins. You know if she still lives in town?" The woman's eyes narrowed suspiciously. "Martha? She passed on 2 winters ago. Who's asking?" Zelda's heart sank. "I'm Zelda Foster. My mother was Catherine Bennett. She and Martha were friends back in Missouri." "Catherine's girl." The woman's expression softened slightly. "I recall Martha mentioning her old friend Catherine. Sorry to hear about Martha. Pneumonia took her." "I see," Zelda said quietly, fighting back tears. Her one connection gone. "You just arriving? Where's your husband?" the woman asked, glancing at Emma. "He's passed on," Zelda replied, the familiar lie easier than explaining the truth. The woman clicked her tongue sympathetically. "Well, if you're looking for work, you might try the Riverview Hotel. They sometimes need help with cleaning. Or the Pines restaurant, though most places prefer to hire women without attachments." Her gaze drifted meaningfully to Emma. Zelda thanked her and moved on, desperation mounting with each step. The Riverview Hotel turned her away. They had just hired someone. The Pines restaurant owner took one look at Emma hiding behind Zelda's skirts and shook his head. "Can't have a child underfoot in a busy kitchen." By sunset, Zelda had tried every establishment in town with no luck. Even the boarding house had no vacancies, or so the pinched-faced proprietress claimed, though Zelda suspected it had more to do with Emma's presence than available rooms. With nowhere else to go, Zelda led Emma to a small creek on the edge of town. They sat beneath a cottonwood tree, sharing the last of their bread and jerky. "Will we sleep here tonight, Mama?" Emma asked, her blue eyes wide. "Just for tonight, sweetheart," Zelda promised, though she had no idea what tomorrow would bring. Look at the stars coming out. Aren't they beautiful? Emma nodded, curling against Zelda's side. Soon, her breathing slowed into sleep, but Zelda remained awake, staring at the night sky, wondering how she had come to this 22 years old alone and homeless with a child to protect. The sound of approaching hoofbeats startled her. She clutched Emma closer as a rider came into view, silhouetted against the rising moon. The horse stopped a respectful distance away, and a man's deep voice called out, "Evening, madam. Don't mean to frighten you." He dismounted, and as he stepped closer, Zelda could make out his features in the moonlight. He was tall, with broad shoulders and a strong jaw shadowed with stubble. His clothes were dusty from the trail denim pants, a faded blue shirt, and a worn leather vest. The cowboy hat he removed revealed dark hair in need of a trim. "I noticed you and your little one sitting out here. Not safe for a woman and child alone at night," he said, keeping his distance. Zelda tensed. "We're fine, thank you." "Pardon my saying so, madam, but you don't look fine." There was genuine concern in his voice, not judgment. "Name's Henry Porter. I work at the Silver Creek Ranch just outside town, Zelda Foster, and this is my daughter, Emma." Henry Porter glanced around at their makeshift camp. "You have nowhere to stay tonight." "We'll manage," Zelda said stiffly, pride keeping her from admitting the truth. Henry was quiet for a moment. "Mrs. Foster, I don't mean to presume, but my boss's wife is looking for help at the ranch house. They've got a room above the kitchen they sometimes let to workers. It's small, but it's clean and warm." Zelda hesitated. Experience had taught her to be wary of men offering help, but something about Henry Porter's straightforward manner seemed trustworthy. And what choice did she really have? When could I speak with them about the position? "I'm headed back now. You're welcome to ride along if you'd like. It's about 3 miles out." Zelda looked down at her sleeping daughter, then back at Henry Porter. "All right," she said finally. "Thank you." Henry nodded, seeming pleased. "Let me help with your bag." As he lifted Emma onto his horse and then offered Zelda a hand up, she couldn't help but notice the gentleness in his calloused hands. She settled behind him, Emma cradled between them, and they set off into the night. The Silver Creek Ranch emerged from the darkness. As they crested a hill, a sprawling main house with warm light glowing from the windows, surrounded by a bunkhouse, barn, and various outbuildings. As they approached, the front door opened and a woman stepped onto the porch, lantern in hand. "That's Mrs. Lancaster," Henry explained, reining in his horse. "She'll treat you fair." Mrs. Lancaster was a sturdy woman in her 50s, with silver-streaked brown hair and kind eyes that quickly assessed Zelda and Emma as Henry explained their situation. "Come inside, dear," she said to Zelda. "You look dead on your feet, and that child needs a proper bed." The warmth of the kitchen enveloped them as they entered. Mr. Lancaster, a gruff-looking man with a thick mustache, sat at the table but stood when they entered. "Found them at the creek edge, Mrs. Lancaster," Henry explained. "Mrs. Foster here is looking for work, and I recalled you mentioning needing help around the house." Mrs. Lancaster nodded. "Indeed we do. Can you cook, Mrs. Foster?" "Yes, madam, and sew and clean. I'm a hard worker." Mrs. Lancaster exchanged a look with her husband, who gave a slight nod. "The room's small," she warned, "and having a child about will mean extra care." "Emma is well behaved," Zelda assured her, "and I'm grateful for any opportunity." Mrs. Lancaster studied her for another moment, then nodded. "We'll try it for a week. The room's yours and meals, plus $3 a week." It wasn't much, but it was a start. "Thank you," Zelda said, relief washing over her. "Thank you both." As Henry prepared to leave, he tipped his hat to Zelda. "Glad to have helped, Mrs. Foster. I'll see you around the ranch." Watching him disappear into the night, Zelda felt a strange mixture of gratitude and apprehension. This cowboy had shown her more kindness in one evening than most had in years. But experience had taught her that kindness from men often came with expectations, and she had Emma to consider. Still, as Mrs. Lancaster showed them to the small but clean room above the kitchen, Zelda allowed herself a moment of hope. Perhaps, just perhaps, Challis would be different. The next morning arrived with rooster crows and the smell of coffee. Zelda woke Emma, helped her dress, and hurried downstairs to begin earning their keep. Mrs. Lancaster was already at the stove. "Good morning. There's bread and preserves on the table. Once you've eaten, I'll show you your duties." The Lancasters ran a substantial cattle operation with 8 cowboys, including Henry, who lived in the bunkhouse. Zelda's responsibilities included helping with meals, laundry, cleaning the main house, and tending the kitchen garden. As the days passed, Zelda fell into the rhythm of ranch life. Emma, too, seemed to thrive in the open spaces, following Mrs. Lancaster around and playing with the barn cats. Mr. Lancaster was reserved but fair, and the cowboys treated her with polite respect. Henry Porter, however, maintained a distance that puzzled Zelda. He would tip his hat when they passed but rarely engaged in conversation. She caught him watching her sometimes when he thought she wasn't looking, particularly when she was with Emma. There was something in his expression she couldn't decipher, not judgment exactly, but intense interest. One afternoon, about 2 weeks after their arrival, Zelda was hanging laundry while Emma played nearby. The spring air was warm, carrying the scent of wildflowers and fresh grass. "You're settling in well." Zelda turned to find Henry leaning against the fence, his hat pushed back, revealing those observant hazel eyes. "Yes, the Lancasters have been very kind," she replied, pinning a shirt to the line. Henry nodded, watching Emma chase a butterfly. "She's a spirited little thing." "Too spirited sometimes," Zelda smiled fondly, "but she's adjusting better than I'd hoped. Children are resilient." Henry stepped closer, helping her lift a heavy wet blanket, "and they need stability. You've given her that." "I've tried," Zelda said softly. There was a moment of comfortable silence as they worked together to hang the blanket. Then Henry asked, "What brought you to Challis, Mrs. Foster, if you don't mind my asking?" Zelda hesitated. "A fresh start, after my husband died." She let the lie hang between them. Henry's eyes met hers, and she had the uncomfortable feeling he could see right through her. "Must be difficult, raising a child alone." "We manage," she said, resuming her work with a bit more force than necessary. "I didn't mean to pry," Henry said gently. "Just wanted you to know that if you need anything, you or Emma, you can ask." Before she could respond, Emma came running over. "Look what I found, Mama." She held up a perfect white feather. Henry crouched down to Emma's level. "That's an eagle feather, Miss Emma. Very special. Some folks believe it brings protection to whoever holds it." Emma's eyes widened. "Really? Can I keep it?" "I reckon the eagle meant for you to have it since he left it where you could find it," Henry said solemnly. Emma beamed, then unexpectedly stepped forward and placed the feather in Henry's large hand. "You keep it. Mama says we should share special things." Henry looked startled, then deeply moved. He carefully tucked the feather into his hat band. "Thank you, Miss Emma. I'll treasure it." As he walked away, Zelda found herself watching him go, something warm stirring in her chest that she hadn't felt in a very long time. The next few weeks brought a steady rhythm to Zelda's life. She worked hard, saved what money she could, and watched Emma flourish in the freedom of ranch life. Mrs. Lancaster proved to be not just an employer but a mentor, teaching Zelda the particulars of managing a ranch kitchen and treating her with respect that had been scarce in her life. Henry, too, became a more constant presence. He would often find reasons to be near the main house, mending a fence that didn't really need mending. offering to carry heavy items for Zelda, or simply sitting on the porch whittling wooden animals for Emma. They began to talk more careful conversations about books they'd read, places they'd been, the changing seasons never straying into personal territories that might expose the secrets each seemed to carry. One bright June morning, Mrs. Lancaster announced that they needed supplies from town. "Zelda, would you mind going? Make a day of it. Emma would enjoy the outing, I expect." "Of course," Zelda agreed, grateful for the chance to visit town under better circumstances than her arrival. "Henry can drive you in the wagon, Mrs. Lancaster added, with a look that made Zelda wonder if the older woman had noticed the growing connection between them. The journey to Challis was pleasant, with Emma chattering excitedly from her place between them on the wagon seat. Henry pointed out landmarks and told stories that had Emma giggling. For a brief time, they almost felt like a family, and Zelda allowed herself to enjoy the illusion. In town, Henry helped them down from the wagon. "I have some business at the bank. Meet you at the general store in an hour." Zelda nodded, taking Emma's hand. They completed the shopping efficiently, then treated themselves to hard candies from the jar on the counter. Outside the store, Zelda came face to face with the gray-haired woman she had first met upon arriving in Challis. The woman's eyebrows rose in recognition. "Well, if it isn't the Foster widow, heard you found work out at Lancaster's place." "Yes, Mrs. Baker, Ida Baker." Her gaze shifted to Emma, then back to Zelda. Surprised Thomas Lancaster took on a woman with a child, not like him to be so charitable. The barb was subtle but clear. Before Zelda could respond, Henry appeared beside her, placing a protective hand at the small of her back. "Mrs. Baker," he greeted, his tone cool but polite. "I see you've met Mrs. Foster. She's become indispensable at the ranch." Mrs. Baker's expression soured slightly. "Has she now?" "Well, this town has always valued traditional family arrangements, Mr. Porter. People notice when those traditions aren't observed. People might do better minding their own affairs," Henry replied evenly. "Mrs. Foster is a fine woman and an excellent mother." "Indeed, Mrs. Baker's lips pinched. "Interesting that you defend her so quickly. Perhaps you've developed a personal interest." Henry didn't flinch. "I admire anyone who works as hard as Mrs. Foster does for their family. Now, if you'll excuse us, we should be getting back to the ranch." As they walked away, Zelda's cheeks burned with humiliation. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," Henry said simply. "Ida Baker has been poisoning this town with her gossip for 20 years. Someone needs to stand up to her. But now she'll talk about you too." Henry shrugged. "Let her. I know who I am and what's right." He looked down at Emma, who was blissfully unaware of the exchange. "Some things are worth defending." On the ride back to the ranch, Zelda was quieter, lost in thought. The encounter had reminded her that no matter how comfortable she'd become at Silver Creek, the shadow of her past still loomed. "Penny for your thoughts?" Henry asked as the ranch came into view. Zelda sighed. I know what people think when they see me with Emma. A young widow with a child, no family. They make assumptions." "People always will," Henry said. "Question is, does it matter what they think?" "It matters when their thinking affects how they treat Emma," Zelda replied. "She deserves better than to be judged for circumstances she had no control over." Henry was quiet for a moment. "You're right, but you can't control what others think. All you can do is live with integrity and surround yourself with people who see the truth of who you are." As they unloaded the supplies, Henry handed Emma down from the wagon with such gentleness that Zelda's heart clenched. How different might Emma's life have been if her real father had possessed even a fraction of Henry Porter's decency. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Zelda sat on the small bench outside the kitchen door, enjoying the cool night air and the symphony of crickets. The sound of boots on gravel announced Henry's approach. "Mind if I join you?" he asked. She moved over, making space. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars emerge. "I never thanked you properly," Zelda said finally, "for finding us that night by the creek, for bringing us here." Henry turned to look at her, his face half-shadowed in the dim light spilling from the kitchen window. "No need for thanks. Couldn't just leave you there." "Most would have," she said softly. "I'm not most," he replied, his voice equally soft. Their eyes met, and Zelda felt a pull toward him that frightened her with its intensity. She looked away quickly. "Henry, there are things about me you don't know, things that might change how you see me." "I doubt that very much," he said, "but if you want to tell me, I'm listening." Zelda took a deep breath. "Emma, she isn't my late husband's child. I had her before I was married. Her father was a man passing through town who made promises he never intended to keep." She waited for the judgment, the disapproval, but Henry remained silent, his expression unchanged. "Richard, my husband, he married me anyway, knowing the truth. He was a good man. But he died after just a year, and his family wanted nothing to do with me or Emma afterward. That's why we left boys." Henry nodded slowly. "Thank you for trusting me with that. You're not disgusted?" "By what?" "That you loved someone who betrayed you. That you chose to keep your child when many wouldn't. That you found a good man who saw your worth." He shook his head. "No, Zelda, if anything, I admire you more." Tears pricked at her eyes. "The world doesn't see it that way." "Then the world is wrong." Henry's hand found hers in the darkness, his calloused fingers gentle against her skin. "A child is always a blessing, and a woman with enough courage to face the world's scorn to protect that child. That's a woman worth knowing." They sat like that, hands touching, until the kitchen light went out and Mrs. Lancaster called softly that it was getting late. As they parted, something had shifted between them, a new understanding, a deeper trust. July brought scorching heat and long days of hard work. The ranch was preparing for the fall cattle drive, and everyone was busy from dawn till dusk. Zelda found herself taking on more responsibilities as Mrs. Lancaster suffered from heat exhaustion and needed to rest more. One sweltering afternoon, Zelda was baking bread in the stifling kitchen while Emma napped upstairs. She heard the door open and turned to find Henry, his shirt damp with sweat from working in the fields. "Mrs. Lancaster asked me to check if you needed anything from the root cellar," he said, removing his hat. "Actually, yes. Could you fetch some potatoes for tonight's stew?" Henry nodded and disappeared down the cellar steps. When he returned with a basket of potatoes, he set it on the table and lingered, watching as she kneaded the dough with practiced motions. "You're good at that," he observed. Zelda smiled. "My mother taught me. It was one of the few things we had time to do together before she passed." "You miss her every day." Zelda dusted flour from her hands. She would have adored Emma. Henry moved closer, leaning against the counter beside her. "Emma's a special child, smart kind. You've done well with her." "I've tried," Zelda said. "Sometimes I worry it's not enough, that she needs more than I can give her alone." "Every child needs love and security. You provide both." Their eyes met, and Zelda found herself unable to look away. Henry reached out slowly, brushing a streak of flour from her cheek. His touch lingered, warm against her skin. "Zelda," he began, his voice low, "I've been wanting to tell you." The back door burst open and one of the ranch hands rushed in. "Porter, we need you. One of the new horses broke through the coral fence. Lancaster says to bring rope." The moment shattered. Henry straightened, reluctantly dropping his hand. "Be right there." To Zelda, he said quietly, "We'll talk later." She nodded, her heart pounding as she watched him go, later never came that day. The escaped horse had led them on a chase that lasted until dusk, and by the time Henry returned to the ranch house, Zelda had already put Emma to bed and retired to their room. The next morning brought chaos of a different sort. Mrs. Lancaster's sister had fallen ill in Colorado, and the Lancasters needed to leave immediately to tend to her. "We'll be gone at least 3 weeks," Mrs. Lancaster explained as she hastily packed. "Zelda, I'm entrusting the house to your care. Henry will oversee the ranch operations." "Can I count on you both?" "Of course," Zelda assured her, though the thought of being alone at the ranch with just Henry and the other cowboys made her nervous for reasons she couldn't quite name. Within hours, the Lancasters were gone, and a strange new dynamic settled over Silver Creek. Zelda maintained her routine, cooking for the men, cleaning, looking after Emma. But without Mrs. Lancaster's presence, she felt more aware of her position, not quite family, not quite servant. Henry, too, seemed more reserved, as if conscious of proprieties now that they lacked a chaperone. He took his meals with the men in the bunkhouse rather than at the main house, and their conversations became brief and focused on ranch business. The distance hurt more than Zelda cared to admit. She had grown accustomed to Henry's company, to the way he listened when she spoke, to how his eyes crinkled at the corners when he smiled. Now, with this new formality between them, she realized just how much she had come to care for him. A week into the Lancasters' absence, a summer storm rolled in. The sky darkened to an ominous purple-gray, and wind whipped through the valley with growing ferocity. Henry appeared at the kitchen door, raindrops already speckling his hat and shoulders. "Storm's coming in fast. The men and I need to secure the livestock. Will you and Emma be all right here?" "We'll be fine," Zelda assured him. "Be careful out there." He nodded, hesitating as if wanting to say more, then disappeared into the gathering storm. The rain came down in sheets, and thunder boomed overhead as Zelda prepared a simple dinner for herself and Emma. The little girl was frightened by the storm, clinging to Zelda's skirts as lightning flashed outside the windows. "Will Henry and the others be okay?" Emma asked, her blue eyes wide. "Of course, sweetheart. They know what they're doing." But as the hours passed and the storm intensified, Zelda found herself growing worried. It was well past dark now, and the men hadn't returned. She kept the lamps burning bright, hoping they would serve as beacons through the driving rain. Finally, near midnight, the back door burst open. Henry staggered in, soaked to the bone and exhausted. Behind him came 2 of the other cowboys in similar condition. "Thank God," Zelda breathed, rushing to help Henry out of his dripping coat. "Are you all right?" "Creek's flooding," he managed, his voice hoarse from shouting over the storm. "Had to move the herd to higher ground. Lost 2 calves, but the rest are safe." Zelda immediately sprang into action, stoking the fire and setting water to boil for coffee. "You need to get out of those wet clothes. All of you. I'll find some of Mr. Lancaster's things you can wear while these dry." The 2 cowboys thanked her but said they'd change in the bunkhouse. Henry, however, swayed on his feet as they left. "You're dead on your feet," Zelda said, concerned. "Here, sit down before you fall down." He obeyed, slumping into a kitchen chair. Zelda brought him coffee laced with whiskey from Mr. Lancaster's supply, then hurried upstairs to find dry clothing. When she returned, Henry had removed his boots but seemed too exhausted to manage anything else. "Emma?" he asked, glancing around. "Asleep upstairs, finally. The storm frightened her." Henry nodded. "Good that she can rest." He attempted to stand but grimaced, clutching his side. "You're hurt," Zelda said, setting down the clothes and moving to his side. "It's nothing. Caught between a panic steer and a fence post. Just bruised." "Let me see," she insisted, her concern overriding her usual sense of propriety. Henry hesitated, then slowly unbuttoned his shirt. Beneath it, an angry purple bruise spread across his ribs on the right side. Zelda gasped softly. "This isn't nothing, you could have broken ribs." "Had worse," he said, though his breath hitched when she gently probed the area. "I'll need to wrap this," she decided. "And you shouldn't be going back out in that storm. You can take Mr. Lancaster's study, there's a dabed in there." Henry looked like he might protest, but another flash of pain silenced him. Zelda helped him into the dry clothes, then bound his ribs with strips of clean linen, trying to ignore the intimacy of the moment and the warmth of his skin beneath her fingers. Once he was settled on the dabed with extra blankets and a fresh cup of coffee, Zelda turned to go. "Zelda," Henry called softly, "thank you." She looked back at him, this strong man now vulnerable in the lamplight. "That's what friends do, Henry." His eyes held hers. "Is that what we are?" "Friends?" The question hung between them, loaded with unspoken meaning. Zelda's heart hammered in her chest. "I hope so," she said finally. "Get some rest. I'll check on you in the morning." Sleep eluded Zelda that night. Her mind filled with images of Henry, the feel of his skin under her hands, the trust in his eyes as he let her tend to him, the question that seemed to ask for so much more than its simple words suggested. Morning brought clear skies and a mess of storm damage to address. Henry, despite Zelda's protests, insisted on helping with the cleanup. His movements were stiff and careful, but his determination was unwavering. As they worked side by side repairing a section of the kitchen garden fence that had blown down, Zelda found herself stealing glances at him. There was something different about him today, a resolved quality to his expression, as if he'd made some important decision. "Zelda," he said finally, setting down his hammer, "there's something I need to tell you." Her heart skipped. "Yes, I've been offered a position, foreman at the Blackwell Ranch near Salmon." Zelda's stomach dropped. "Oh, congratulations. When would you start?" "They want me there by August 1st, just 2 weeks away. It's a good opportunity, better pay, more responsibility." "Of course you should take it," Zelda said automatically, though inside she felt as if something precious was slipping through her fingers. "You deserve it." Henry studied her face. "Thing is, I'm not sure I want to go." "Why not? It sounds perfect for you." "It would mean leaving Silver Creek." "Leaving?" He hesitated. "Leaving people I've come to care about." Zelda's breath caught. "Henry, I care about you, Zelda," he said simply. "And Emma." "More than I should, perhaps. More than is wise given your situation and mine." "My situation," she repeated, uncertain. "You're still healing from your past, and I." He looked away. "I have my own burdens to carry." "What burdens, Henry?" He was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Then, "I was married once, in Texas before I came to Idaho. Her name was Sarah. She died in childbirth along with our son. I couldn't save either of them." Zelda's heart ached for him. "I'm so sorry." "For a long time after, I didn't think I could ever care for anyone again. Didn't want to risk that pain." His eyes found hers. "Then I found you and Emma by that creek, and something changed. Watching you with her, seeing your strength and devotion. It woke something in me I thought was dead." Zelda couldn't speak, overwhelmed by his confession. "I don't expect anything from you," Henry continued. "I know you came here for a fresh start, not to complicate your life with a broken cowboy's feelings. But I needed you to know before I made any decisions about the Blackwell offer." Finally finding her voice, Zelda said softly, "You're not broken, Henry. Neither am I. Just marked by life like everyone." He smiled faintly. "Is that your gentle way of letting me down easy?" "No," she said, surprising herself with her boldness. "It's my way of saying I care for you too. And the thought of you leaving Silver Creek, it hurts more than I want to admit." Hope flickered in his eyes. "Zelda, Mama, Henry, look what I found." Emma came running toward them, clutching something in her small hands. The moment between them paused as they both turned to her. "What is it, sweetheart?" Zelda asked, kneeling down. Emma opened her hands to reveal a tiny blue bird's egg. "It fell from its nest in the storm. Can we help it?" Henry crouched beside them, wincing slightly at the movement. "The nest might be damaged, but we could make a new one." "Birds sometimes adopt eggs that aren't theirs. Like how you take care of me even though you're not my papa?" Emma asked innocently. Henry's eyes widened, then softened as he looked at the little girl. "Something like that, Miss Emma." They spent the next hour constructing a small nest from twine and grass, then carefully placed it with the egg in a sheltered spot in the tree where Emma had found it. As they worked together, Zelda felt a sense of rightness she couldn't explain, as if the three of them belonged together somehow. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Zelda found Henry on the porch staring out at the star-filled sky. She sat beside him on the bench, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Have you decided about the Blackwell position?" she asked quietly. Henry turned to look at her, his face half in shadow. "I'm thinking I might have reasons to stay at Silver Creek, if those reasons want me to." Zelda took a deep breath. "Emma asked me today if you were going to be her new papa. Did she?" His voice was carefully neutral, but Zelda could hear the tension beneath it. "She's grown very attached to you. And you? Have you grown attached as well?" Zelda met his gaze steadily. "Yes, more than is probably wise." Henry's hand found hers, his fingers intertwining with hers. "Wisdom is overrated sometimes." "Henry," she said softly, "I need you to understand what you'd be taking on. Emma and I, we come with complications. People talk. They judge." "Let them," he said firmly. "I know what matters. A good woman with a loving heart. A child who deserves every chance at happiness." His free hand came up to cup her cheek. "I've seen how some folks in town look at you, Zelda. It makes my blood boil, as if having a child somehow makes you less worthy of respect." "That's the way of the world," she said sadly. "It shouldn't be." His thumb gently stroked her cheekbone. "When I first saw you by that creek, holding Emma so protectively, all I could think was how brave you were, how strong. I admired you then, and I admire you even more now that I know you better." Tears pricked at Zelda's eyes. "No one's ever seen me that way before." "Then no one's ever really seen you," he said simply. In the quiet that followed, with the night sounds of the ranch surrounding them, Henry leaned forward and kissed her. It was gentle, almost reverent, his lips warm against hers. Zelda felt something bloom in her chest, hope, perhaps, or joy so long absent she'd almost forgotten its feel. When they parted, Henry rested his forehead against hers. "I'm not going to Blackwell Ranch, Zelda. If the Lancasters will have me, I'm staying right here. With you and Emma, if you'll have me too." Instead of answering, Zelda kissed him again, pouring into it all the words she couldn't yet say. The Lancasters returned in early August to find the ranch running smoothly under Henry and Zelda's care. If they noticed the change in the relationship between their ranch hand and their housekeeper, they said nothing directly, though Mrs. Lancaster's knowing smiles suggested she approved. Summer faded into autumn, and with it came the cattle drive. Henry would be gone for nearly 3 weeks, taking the herd to the railhead at Pocatello. The night before his departure, he asked Zelda to walk with him down to the creek that ran along the eastern edge of the ranch property. The evening was cool, with the first hints of fall crispness in the air. Leaves had begun to turn, splashing the landscape with gold and red. Henry led Zelda to a large flat rock beside the burbling creek, where they sat side by side, watching the water catch the last rays of sunlight. "I've been thinking," Henry said, his voice carrying a nervous quality Zelda had never heard before, "about the future, about what I want from life. Zelda's heart quickened. And what is that? A home? A family? He turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. You and Emma. If you'll have me. Henry, are you asking? I'm asking if you'll marry me, Zelda Foster. His eyes searched hers. I know it hasn't been long and maybe I should wait, be more proper about it, but life's taught me not to waste time when you know what you want. Joy bubbled up inside her, but caution tempered it. Henry, you know what you'd be taking on. People will talk. They'll say you're a fool for marrying a woman with another man's child. Then I'd say I'm the luckiest fool alive. He squeezed her hands. I love Emma as if she were my own. And I love you, Zelda. Not despite your past, but including it, because everything you've experienced has made you the woman you are. Tears welled in Zelda's eyes. I love you too, she whispered, the words feeling both frightening and liberating. But are you certain? Really certain? More certain than I've ever been of anything. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, simple ring, a silver band with a modest pearl. It was my mother's. She'd want you to have it. Zelda looked at the ring, then back at Henry's earnest face. Yes, she said, her voice steadying with conviction. Yes, I'll marry you, Henry Porter. His face lit with such joy that it nearly took her breath away. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that spoke of the life they would build together. When they returned to the ranch house hand in hand, Emma was waiting on the porch with Mrs. Lancaster. The little girl took one look at their faces and clapped her hands. Did you ask her? She demanded of Henry. Did she say yes? Zelda gasped. You knew? Henry grinned sheepishly. I thought it proper to ask Emma's permission first. She's the most important person in your life, after all. Emma ran to them, and Henry scooped her up with one arm, keeping his other around Zelda's waist. What do you think, Miss Emma? Ready to make this official? Yes. Emma threw her arms around his neck. Now you can be my papa for real. Mrs. Lancaster wiped a tear from her eye. Well, it's about time. Thomas and I were beginning to think we'd have to lock you two in the root cellar to get you to admit your feelings. They decided to marry before winter set in. The cattle drive couldn't be delayed, so Henry left the next morning as planned, but with promises to return in 3 weeks for their wedding. Those 3 weeks were both the longest and shortest of Zelda's life. She sewed a simple but elegant wedding dress from Fabric Mrs. Lancaster insisted on purchasing in town. Emma helped choose wildflowers to press for her mother's bouquet. Mr. Lancaster offered to give Zelda away, and Mrs. Lancaster took charge of the wedding feast. The day before Henry was due to return, Zelda and Emma went into town for final wedding supplies. As they left the general store, they ran into Ida Baker and 2 other town matrons. The women eyed Zelda's ring and exchanged meaningful glances. So it's true then, Mrs. Baker said. You've managed to convince Henry Porter to marry you. Zelda stiffened but kept her voice even. Henry and I are to be married next Saturday, yes. Mrs. Baker clicked her tongue. Such a shame. Henry's a good man. Could have had his pick of respectable girls from good families. Instead, he's chosen a woman who's already proven her. Indiscretion, one of the other women added with a pointed glance at Emma. Anger flared in Zelda's chest, but before she could respond, a familiar voice spoke from behind her. Ladies, I'd appreciate it if you'd mind your manners when speaking to my fiancé. Zelda turned to find Henry standing there, trail dusty but smiling, having returned a day early from the cattle drive. Henry, Emma cried, running to him. He caught her in a hug, then stepped to Zelda's side, sliding an arm around her waist. Mrs. Baker, Mrs. Collins, Mrs. Evans. He acknowledged the women with a tip of his hat, his tone cool but civil. As you've heard, Zelda has done me the great honor of agreeing to be my wife. I'd consider it a personal courtesy if you'd extend her the respect she deserves. Mrs. Baker's lips pinched. "We're only concerned for your welfare, Henry, taking on another man's child. People will talk." "Let them," Henry said simply. "I know exactly what I'm gaining in this marriage. Zelda is the finest woman I've ever known, and Emma is a blessing. Any man with sense would see that." "You say that now," Mrs. Collins muttered. "But raising another man's then I get two blessings instead of one," Henry interrupted firmly. "A remarkable wife and a wonderful daughter. I'd call that the best fortune a man could hope for." He turned to Zelda, his eyes soft with love. "Ready to head home, darling?" Tears of gratitude and love pricked at Zelda's eyes. "More than ready." As they walked away, Emma between them holding both their hands, Zelda heard Mrs. Baker's parting shot. "It won't last. Mark my words." But Henry just squeezed her hand and smiled. "Don't give them another thought. They don't matter to our happiness." The wedding took place on a perfect autumn Saturday at Silver Creek Ranch. The Lancasters had transformed the barn into a charming chapel, with lanterns hanging from the rafters and wildflowers adorning every surface. Most of the ranch hands attended, along with a few friendly townspeople who had defied the disapproval of others to celebrate with them. Zelda wore her new dress of ivory muslin, with Emma at her side in a matching smaller version. When Henry saw them walking toward him, his eyes filled with such love that Zelda felt her doubts and fears melt away. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When it came time for the vows, Henry surprised her by having special words prepared. "Zelda, I promise to love you every day of our lives, to cherish you as the gift you are. And I promise to love Emma as my own daughter, to protect her, guide her, and support her always." He looked down at Emma then, who was watching with wide eyes. "Emma, I promise to be the best father I can be, to honor the trust you've placed in me, and to make a home where you will always feel safe and loved." Emma beamed up at him. "I love you, Papa Henry." There wasn't a dry eye in the barn. After the ceremony, during the celebration, Henry pulled Zelda aside. "I have something for you," he said, leading her to a quiet corner. He pulled a folded document from his pocket. "A wedding gift." Zelda opened it, then gasped. It was adoption papers for Emma, already partially filled out. "Henry, if you agree, and when Emma is ready, I'd like to make it official. I want her to have my name, to be my daughter in every way that matters." Tears spilled down Zelda's cheeks as she threw her arms around him. "Yes. Oh, yes." Later, as the sun set and the dancing continued, Zelda watched Emma twirling in Henry's arms, her laughter ringing out above the music. Mrs. Lancaster came to stand beside her. "You've found a good man there," the older woman said approvingly. "I have," Zelda agreed. "Better than I ever dreamed possible." "And he's found exactly what he needed too," Mrs. Lancaster added, "a family to heal his heart." Zelda looked at her in surprise. "You knew about Sarah and the baby," Mrs. Lancaster nodded. "He told Thomas when he first came here. Broken man he was then. But look at him now." Zelda watched as Henry set Emma down and crossed the barn toward her, his eyes never leaving hers. He extended his hand. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Porter?" The name, her new name, sent a thrill through her. "You may indeed, Mr. Porter." As he swept her into his arms, Zelda knew that whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, she, Henry, and Emma. A family forged not by blood but by choice and love. Winter settled over Silver Creek Ranch, blanketing the land in pristine white. The Porters settled into married life in the small cabin Mr. Lancaster had offered them a wedding gift, he'd said, along with a small piece of land at the eastern edge of the ranch property. "You'll want your own place," he'd explained. "And we want you both to stay on, Henry as foreman and Zelda helping at the main house when needed." It was more than they could have hoped for independence while maintaining the security of their positions at the ranch. Henry spent his free time making improvements to the cabin, adding a room for Emma and reinforcing the walls against the bitter Idaho winters. Christmas came with a fresh blanket of snow and a warmth inside the little cabin that had nothing to do with the crackling fire. They had simple gifts: a hand-carved rocking horse for Emma from Henry, a new wool coat for Henry from Zelda, and drawings from Emma for both of them. But the greatest gift was the sense of family that surrounded them, the knowledge that they belonged to each other. As they sat by the fire that night, Emma asleep in her new bed, Zelda rested her head on Henry's shoulder. "Happy?" he asked, kissing her hair. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied truthfully. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is real, that you chose us, that we're a family." "Best choice I ever made," Henry said, pulling her closer. "Though I think Emma would say she chose me, not the other way around." Zelda laughed softly. "She did take to you immediately. Children have good instincts, better than adults sometimes." Henry's voice grew thoughtful. "I saw Ida Baker in town yesterday. She actually nodded to me. Progress, I suppose." "Small victories," Zelda agreed. "Though I care less and less what people like her think. We know the truth of our family." Henry nodded, then shifted slightly so he could look into her eyes. "Speaking of family, how would you feel about expanding ours someday?" Zelda's heart skipped. "You mean a brother or sister for Emma, when you're ready, of course." His eyes were full of hope and love, but also patience. "I know it's soon." Zelda took his hand and placed it on her abdomen. "I think it might be sooner than we planned." Henry's eyes widened. "Zelda, are you saying—" "I'm not certain yet," she cautioned, "but I'm late and I've been feeling different, like I did with Emma." Joy spread across Henry's face. He pulled her into his arms, holding her as if she were made of glass. "A baby," he whispered. "Our baby." "Are you happy?" she asked, suddenly uncertain. "It's happening so fast." "I'm beyond happy," he assured her, kissing her deeply. "I'm blessed. Twice over already with you and Emma, and now possibly a third time." His hand caressed her stomach reverently. "Our child." By February, there was no doubt Zelda was expecting. They told Emma one snowy evening, unsure how the 5-year-old would take the news. A baby brother or sister. She repeated, her small brow furrowed in consideration. "Yes, sweetheart," Zelda said. "How do you feel about that?" Emma thought for a moment, then broke into a wide smile. "I can teach them things, like how to feed the chickens and how to make snow angels." Henry laughed, ruffling her hair. "You'll be a wonderful big sister." As winter gave way to spring, Zelda's body changed with the seasons. The adoption papers for Emma were officially filed and approved, making her legally Emma Porter. The little girl took to her new name with pride, practicing writing it carefully under Zelda's guidance. One warm May evening, as Zelda sat on the porch mending, a wagon approached their cabin. To her surprise, it was Ida Baker, along with Mrs. Collins and several other town ladies. Zelda stood awkwardly, one hand supporting her now visible belly. "Mrs. Baker, ladies, what brings you here?" Mrs. Baker stepped forward, looking uncharacteristically hesitant. "We've come to invite you to the quilting circle, Mrs. Porter. We meet on Wednesday afternoons at the church hall." She gestured to the wagon, where Zelda could see several bundles. "And we've brought some things for the baby, just some practical items, nothing fancy." Stunned, Zelda managed to say, "That's very kind of you." Mrs. Baker nodded stiffly. "Well, you're a part of this community now, and—" She hesitated. "And I may have been hasty in my judgment. Your husband is a good man, and anyone can see he's devoted to you and the child Emma. A man like that doesn't choose unwisely." It wasn't quite an apology, but from Ida Baker, it was extraordinary. Zelda inclined her head graciously. "Thank you. I would be honored to join the quilting circle." As the women helped bring in the baby items, handmade blankets, tiny clothes, practical supplies, Zelda felt a shift in her relationship with the town. She might never be fully accepted by everyone, but this gesture represented a beginning, a willingness to let the past be past. When Henry returned from the fields and heard about the visit, he shook his head in amazement. "Never thought I'd see the day Ida Baker would extend an olive branch." "People can surprise you," Zelda said, folding a tiny gown. "Just like you surprised me that night by the creek." Henry pulled her into his arms, his hand resting on her growing belly. "Best surprise of my life finding you two, and soon to be three." Summer arrived with blazing heat and the promise of new life. Zelda's time grew near, and Henry became increasingly protective, reluctant to leave her alone for long periods. Mr. Lancaster, understanding the situation, assigned Henry tasks closer to home. On a scorching July afternoon, Zelda felt the first pains begin. Emma was with Mrs. Lancaster, having a baking lesson, so Zelda was alone when her water broke. She managed to get word to Henry via one of the ranch hands, and he came racing back to the cabin, dust billowing behind his horse. "I'll fetch the doctor," he said, his face pale with worry. "There's time yet," Zelda assured him, though the contractions were steadily increasing. "But yes, please bring him." Henry hesitated, clearly torn between staying with her and going for help. "I don't want to leave you." Zelda touched his cheek. "I'll be fine. This isn't my first time, remember?" But even as the words left her mouth, a particularly strong contraction hit, making her gasp. Fear flashed in Henry's eyes, fear she knew stemmed from his past loss. "Henry," she said firmly, once she could speak again. "This isn't like what happened with Sarah. I'm strong, and so is this baby. We're going to be fine." He nodded, visibly gathering himself. "I'll be back as quick as I can. Mrs. Lancaster will come sit with you until then." True to his word, Henry returned with the doctor in record time. Mrs. Lancaster had indeed come to the cabin and was efficiently preparing everything needed for the birth. Emma was staying with Mr. Lancaster at the main house, excited about the impending arrival of her sibling. The labor progressed steadily, and though the pain was intense, Zelda found strength in Henry's unwavering presence. Unlike many men who would wait outside during childbirth, he refused to leave her side, holding her hand and wiping her brow, murmuring encouragement through each contraction. "You're the strongest woman I know," he told her as the moment neared. "You can do this, Zelda." With a final, tremendous effort, Zelda brought their child into the world. The doctor's voice came as if from a distance. "It's a boy, a healthy boy." The baby's cry filled the room, strong, indignant, alive. Henry's face transformed with wonder and joy as the doctor placed their son in Zelda's arms. "A son," he whispered, touching the tiny fingers with reverent gentleness. "Our son." Zelda looked up at him through tears of joy and exhaustion. "He needs a name." Henry gazed at the baby, then at her. "What about Thomas after Mr. Lancaster? He's been like a father to me since I came here." "Thomas Porter," Zelda tried it out. "It's perfect." Later, when Emma was brought to meet her new brother, her awe was palpable. "He's so tiny," she whispered, peering into the blanket bundle. "Hello, Thomas. I'm your big sister, Emma." Henry gathered Emma onto his lap next to where Zelda rested in bed. "What do you think, Miss Emma? Is he a good addition to our family?" Emma nodded solemnly. "The best. Now we're even more of a real family." Henry's eyes met Zelda's over their daughter's head. "We've been a real family from the start, sweetheart. But yes, Thomas makes our circle even more complete." As night fell and the household quieted, Henry sat beside Zelda on the bed, little Thomas sleeping peacefully in her arms. Emma had been tucked into her own bed, though only after extracting promises that she could hold her brother first thing in the morning. "I was so afraid," Henry admitted quietly, his fingers gently stroking the baby's downy head. All I could think about was Sarah and how quickly joy turned to tragedy. "I know," Zelda said softly, "but some stories have different endings, Henry. Ours did." He leaned down to kiss her, then the baby's forehead. "I never thought I'd have this again, a family, children, hope for the future. When Sarah and our son died, I thought that chance was gone forever. And I never thought I'd find a man who could love Emma as his own, who could see past the circumstances of her birth to the blessing she is." Henry smiled. "Like I told those busybodies in town, I got 2 blessings instead of 1, and now 3. His voice grew husky with emotion. "Thank you, Zelda, for trusting me with your heart, for giving me this family." "And thank you," she replied, "for seeing value where others saw only shame, for loving us both when it would have been easier to walk away." Outside, the stars shone down on Silver Creek Ranch, on the small cabin where a family slept, a family not made by convention or blood alone, but forged through choice, acceptance, and enduring love. 5 years later, Silver Creek Ranch still stood as it had for decades, but much had changed for the Porter family. Henry and Zelda now owned a larger parcel of land adjacent to the Lancasters, with a comfortable 2-story home they had built themselves. 3 children now filled their home with laughter and occasional chaos: 10-year-old Emma, 5-year-old Thomas, and 2-year-old Catherine, named for Zelda's mother. The adoption of Emma had been finalized years ago, though they had always been honest with her about her origins. "You're special," Henry had explained when she was old enough to understand. "Most children don't get to be chosen by their fathers, but I chose you, Emma, and that makes our bond one of love and choice, not just chance." On a golden autumn afternoon, much like the one when Henry had proposed years earlier, the Porter family gathered for a picnic by Silver Creek. Emma, now a leggy girl with long dark braids, was teaching Thomas how to skip stones across the water. Catherine toddled after butterflies, her chubby legs carrying her determinedly through the grass while Zelda kept a watchful eye. Henry sat beside Zelda on the blanket, his arm around her shoulders. 10 years ago today," he said quietly. She looked at him in surprise. "What was 10 years ago?" "The day I rode past the creek edge in Challis and found a woman and her daughter with nowhere to go." He squeezed her shoulder. "Best detour I ever took." Zelda leaned into him, watching their children play. Who would have thought that night would lead to this? 3 beautiful children, our own land, acceptance in the community. It was true over the years. Even the most judgmental of the townspeople had come to respect the Porters. Henry's integrity and hard work, combined with Zelda's quiet dignity and generosity, had won over most hearts. Emma, with her bright intelligence and kind spirit, had become a favorite at the school, and no one now questioned her place in the Porter family. "I knew," Henry said simply. "Not the details, perhaps, but I knew you were something special, Zelda Foster, from that very first night." "Even with all my complications," she teased. "Especially with them," he replied, kissing her temple. "They made you who you are: strong, compassionate, unbreakable." "Papa, Mama, look!" Thomas called, successfully skipping a stone 3 times across the creek's surface. "Well done," Henry called back, pride evident in his voice. Emma, not to be outdone, found a flatter stone and sent it skipping 5 times. The siblings' friendly competition continued, as Catherine abandoned her butterfly chase and came toddling back to her parents, plopping herself in Henry's lap with the complete confidence of a child who knows she is adored. "She has your eyes," Zelda observed, smoothing their younger daughter's wild curls. "And your spirit," Henry replied. "Heaven help us all when she's Emma's age." They laughed together, the sound joining with the children's voices and the creek's gentle burble to create a symphony of family happiness. As the afternoon waned, they packed up their picnic and headed home. Emma and Thomas ran ahead, while Henry carried a sleepy Catherine. Zelda walked beside him, her hand in his, contentment filling her heart. At the house, as the children dispersed to their various activities, Emma to her books, Thomas to his wooden horses, Catherine to her nap, Henry pulled Zelda into the kitchen for a private moment. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He pulled out a small package wrapped in brown paper. "What's this for?" she asked, untying the string. 10 years deserves acknowledgement," he said simply. Inside was a delicate silver locket. When Zelda opened it, she found tiny portraits of all 3 children, expertly painted in miniature. "Oh, Henry," she breathed. "It's beautiful." "Had it made in boys last month when I went for supplies," he explained, helping her fasten it around her neck. "Thought you should keep them close to your heart, though I know they're already there." Tears pricked at her eyes. "I love it, and I love you, Henry Porter, more with each passing year." He gathered her in his arms. "Remember what Mrs. Baker said at our wedding, that it wouldn't last?" Zelda smiled against his chest. "I do. I reckon we've proved her wrong, wouldn't you say?" "Indeed we have." She looked up at him, this man who had seen value where others saw only liability, who had chosen to love not just her but her child as his own. "And we'll keep proving her wrong for decades to come." "That's a promise, Mrs. Porter." He sealed it with a kiss, one that still held all the tenderness and passion of their first. Outside the window, Emma called to Thomas, their voices rising in laughter. Catherine's soft snores drifted down from upstairs. And in the kitchen, Zelda and Henry Porter held each other, surrounded by the life they had built together, a life rich with love, acceptance, and the knowledge that sometimes the most unexpected beginnings lead to the most beautiful journeys. For Zelda, who had once been rejected for having a child, and Henry, who had lost his first chance at fatherhood, their family was more than just happiness. It was redemption, healing, and the fulfillment of dreams they had both thought lost forever. Just as Henry had said on that fateful day in town, facing down the judgment of others, they had indeed received 2 blessings instead of 1. And those blessings had multiplied beyond anything they could have imagined on that summer night by a creek in Challis, Idaho.